that we just get a sort of sense of, I guess, crystal ball gazing from two great guests here today. Jimmy Wales is the founder of the online non-profit encyclopedia Wikipedia, needs absolutely no introduction, and Bob Collymore is the CEO of Safaricom in Kenya. He's been doing that job since November of 2010. It's an organization we've talked about an awful lot today, one that I know is playing such an enormous role in the mobile for good sector. Guys, tell me what you are firstly working together on.
Well, we've just, it's very preliminary, and what we're doing, so this is a program that we've had for about a year or two now called Wikipedia Zero. It can take several different forms, but the essential concept is to try to think about ways that we can get people in developing markets the ability to access Wikipedia without paying data charges, so that when people do finally get a good feature phone or they've got a smartphone, that they're able to go on Wikipedia and get that basic knowledge without having to worry about the data cost. And that's what we're looking to do.
How important is this to you?
You know, I reflect back a couple of years ago. I was with my son in Guildford, and it was lunchtime, and he said, "Let's go have lunch," and he wanted to go to McDonald's. And we got up, and I said, "You know, what do you want?" And he says, "I want chicken nuggets." I said, "Okay, can I have chicken nuggets?" He says, "How many?" He says, 20 pieces. I thought, wow, 20 pieces. And I saw some kids on the side, and they were sitting at computers. And I said, "What are they doing?" He says, "Oh, they're just accessing the internet." I said, "Who's paying?" He says, "Nobody pays. I mean, it's just like free." And I reflected at that point that if I look back at the kids in Kenya, a kid in a village school in Kenya, the only knowledge they have access to, information they have access to, is a rather pathetic library of maybe 20 or 100 books, say. Whereas these kids sitting at the side of McDonald's eating 20 pieces of chicken nuggets had access typically through 2 clicks, because whenever I want information, you know, you go onto Wikipedia, and it's just 2 clicks and you get the information. Incidentally, the one thing I was just saying to Jimmy, I felt so horribly inadequate when I clicked on his Wikipedia page and compared it to mine. He has like 16 pages about Jimmy.
Are you self-editing that?
But you know, just those 2 clicks will give them the answer to any question in the world. And so it made sense for us to really bring that home. And instead of those kids having to have you know, a big rucksack and books if they can afford it, they now have access. And I think earlier today, someone said that, you know, companies need to kind of broaden out, you know, what is their core activity. And I think with Safaricom, because the 2 words which we use a lot today, and a lot of credit to the 2 people in the room. One is Michael Joseph, I don't know where he is, Michael's there, and the other is Nick Hughes. The 2 most used words today were M-Pesa and Kenya. And the reason for that is because the core activity, the one thing Michael and I does have in common, our core activity is about transforming lives. And I think this project that Jimmy and I are talking about is very much about transforming lives, bringing that information right to the bottom of the pyramid.
What happens next, Jimmy? You're at the forefront of the sort of, you know, mobile information world. What's next?
Well, for us, a big focus for the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the charity that runs Wikipedia, is broadening access to Wikipedia in the developing world. And that takes many forms. It takes the form of you know, trying to work with mobile carriers to see how we can lower the actual cost. But it also involves working more and more in the local languages. In many places around the world, that's incredibly important. One of my favorite success stories is the Kazakh Wikipedia in Kazakhstan, which is enormous. It's enjoyed explosive growth in the last couple of years, as that community there has really rallied together to build Wikipedia in their own language, in their mother tongue. It's so diverse, so many different places around the world where things are different. In India, you used to be able to say, well, you know, anyone in India who has a computer speaks English, so you don't really need to worry about the local languages. We've passed that point a long time ago in India. Today in India, increasingly people have access to computers and access to mobile internet who don't speak English, and so we really care a lot about the growth of the Indian languages. So there's a lot of different pieces to what we're doing.
But why hasn't the Kenya success that we've seen been scalable, not just across the continent, but around the world? It still stands, M-Pesa, as a great example, which is unique to a certain extent. It's the exception that proves the rule. You know, what made it work, and what do you do to make it, you know, sustainable elsewhere?
Well, I think Michael gave the answer earlier. You need to be a bit passionate about some stuff. And I know Vittorio's sitting in the front seat here, and you know, he'd like me to say that I'm passionate about shareholder returns. But actually, what, you know, the legacy that I picked up from Michael is we're passionate about transforming lives. And when Michael started this thing a while ago, he wasn't doing it to make a return. He was doing it so he can make a difference. And it is making a difference. And you know what? If you do that, then it's going to make a return. And you know, I'd like to think that we're making Vittorio a reasonably good return on the numbers. But we're setting out to transform lives, whether it is M-Pesa or it is any of those other things which has leapt off from M-Pesa. So, you know, we've recently launched a more comprehensive banking product, which now you don't have to leave your seat. You can just sit and do it from your phone. And we, you know, the reason for that is not because we want to make a ton of money out of it. The reason for that is because we want to really enable Kenyans to have some basic dignity about the way they borrow money and the way they save money.
One of the byproducts of M-Pesa has also been this sense of incubation of ideas by locals for locals. And one of the questions we had earlier on is that there is a sense of, there is a barrier to entry still for people locally in the emerging world, to give them the opportunity. I say them, as we talk on the stage from London here, but I don't see it as a them and us situation here, but many people do. Many people say, you know, the ideas are still incubated or innovated in London or San Francisco, and they're not happening where the transformation can happen and by the people who know what they're talking about. Does that make sense to you?
I don't agree with it. That's the first thing. Because I think M-Pesa, the ownership, the mother of M-Pesa, sits kind of like all over the place. But the mother of M-Pesa actually are the two guys who are sitting here. But Kenyans, however, a Kenyan will slit my throat if I say to them, a Kenyan didn't invent it. And so what we've done is we've allowed them to believe that it is theirs. Therefore, they've taken ownership. They've embraced it. If we said to them, this thing was developed in Cambridge, you know, they're likely to push back. So that's the first thing. The second point I'd make is that, you know, I don't actually think that there's such a thing as borders, as geographic borders. You know,
some people here did, though, today. I mean, it's
yes, they did.
You made the point,
They did, and I actually disagree with them because the thing is done across boundaries. You know, Jimmy lives here in London. You know, we spoke for the first time last week. I think you just arrived back in the country. We then spoke with Cool. We then spoke with Amit, who was sitting in Uganda. So there is not a, you know, there's not a sense that it's incubated in San Francisco or in London. I think what's important is to understand where the need is and then fix that. It doesn't really matter where it's made.
Interesting. All right, questions from any of you guys here in the audience? Let's do some crystal ball gazing at this stage. We've got about 10-12 minutes left of today's summit. Jimmy, how long ago was it that you started Wikipedia?
So I started Wikipedia in 2001.
2001, all those years ago. Okay, so 12 years ago.
But I want to talk about my phone.
Sure.
So this is a phone. This phone actually woke my mind up. About a year ago, a friend of mine who's working in mobile in several African countries, including Kenya, started telling me about the phone, and he got this and gave it to me. So this is an unlocked 3G phone. He bought it on the street in Kenya for $85 and gave it to me last year. This year it's $50, unlocked. It's a Chinese-built Huawei phone. And for the first time, as I'm using it, and you know, and they've sold, I don't know, a couple 100,000 of these.
300,000.
300,000. And I see, wow, you know, what I always thought about mobile in Africa is well, everybody knows, it's very basic phones. You can do SMS. This is coming in the future someday. Well, the someday is happening faster than I ever realized. And so for me, this is part of what got me really energized to say, actually, let's go back and take another look at Africa, because we've focused most of our attention on India, for example, first, with the view that it was ready for us to really start to do things. And we say, wow, it's really hard to work in a place where people barely have any access at all. People say, what can Wikipedia do for the poorest of the poor? And I have to say, unfortunately, not much yet. Until they get access, until they come online, well, we can encourage people to print books and give to them and so on. But so this phone really, and I use it every day here in London, and it's great. It's the one thing I say is the screen's a little smaller than your iPhone. It's not quite as good, but my battery lasts for 2 days. I bet you can't say that. So anyway, for me, I think it's worth, if you go and you take a look at the numbers, you take a look at the statistics for the trend, the upward trend in smartphone sales, and obviously it's still a very small penetration, but that upward trend is there really strongly. You look at the total bandwidth, the total bandwidth into Nigeria, for example, I was just looking at the other day, it's skyrocketing. Things that are very hard for us to all imagine are going to happen much faster than we realize. People are going to be coming online for the first time. I mean, there's this vibrant community of young app developers growing in Kenya and Nigeria. It's mind-boggling to think about what the possibilities are, and I'm super excited about it.
Bob, what are the possibilities going forward?
Well, I think as we think about this, we need to think about the so-called bottom of the pyramid. And a number of speakers earlier today said that's where you start. You don't start from the top. The stuff that Jimmy's organization and mine are talking about is about bottom of the pyramid, is that you don't need a smartphone in order to get access to it. So I think that as we as a community, the community is not just the mobile industry, but as we think about it, we have to start there, because that is actually where the need is. Frankly, one of the things I'm slightly disappointed about during the course of today is that we do tend to think a little bit in London or if you were sitting in New York, it'd be the same thing. We think that everybody, you need to have the latest iPhone. And actually you don't. Really you don't. Because M-Pesa, which is one of the most transformative things that we have launched, it takes the most basic phone. It just needs to be able to do text, which is every phone. So the creativity is not in the technology. We talked about this a little earlier today. There's a new product which was mentioned earlier today, this M-Kopa. M-Kopa, 80% of households in Kenya don't have access to grid electricity, but they need light, and as far as we're concerned, they also need to be able to charge their phones. So typically, a Kenyan would pay about 50 shillings a day in kerosene for light. Then they'd pay another 20 shillings to send their phone up to town to get it charged. So what's happened, and again, Nick Hughes is at the back of the room here. So what Nick did is he packaged a solar panel, M-Pesa, a lithium battery, and a SIM card. All existing technology. None of this is earth-shattering. And what happens is the customer now pays 40 shillings a day, which is less than he pays for kerosene. He now has 3 lights. He can now charge his phone, which is good for us. And he can pay daily by using M-Pesa. And if he doesn't want to pay today, then it's fine. The SIM card just deactivates the equipment for the day, and when he wants to pay again. And at the end of a year, he owns it. So now he has free lights. So what we've done is we've leapfrogged. How many people here on the South Bank would like to be able to get free electricity? And that's what he's done. So it's not about waiting for technological leaps. It's about being able to have a creative outlook. And again, as my predecessor Michael said, you just have to be ballsy about it and have the courage of a conviction and do it. Not do the pilots. I mean, I hate pilots.
And what I love about this, and it's actually a broader point, that what I love about the mobile industry, although as any consumer gets frustrated with them from time to time, we all got something to hate about our phones, but for a long time there's been a lot of thinking around charitable efforts, 1 laptop per child, these kinds of things, wonderful projects, great projects, very difficult to scale, very difficult to be sure that they're even the right answer. When I hear a story like this, I hear about sustainability. I hear, it's a business. Somebody's found a way to offer customers something that benefits their life and saves them a little bit of money, that's truly transformative in a way that charitable efforts really cannot be. And I think that's very exciting.
I'll give you another example. Sorry.
Sure. I was going to take a question from there. Go on.
Another quick example about how you use existing technology. A kid in a school doesn't have access to the books that we talked about. So what we do is we give them a tablet. But you don't have to, it doesn't have to be a 3G tablet. It can be a Wi-Fi tablet. So I can put coverage into the school. Then you need to get the content. Well, we've got some pretty good schools in Kenya. You can record that content. You can put it onto our cloud. And the school in a rural district using a Wi-Fi, there's no point giving them a 3G because they can't afford the 3G, the 3G data when he gets home. But he can afford to get the Wi-Fi. So that's a simple solution which we're currently rolling out in Kenya. And it doesn't take a whole load of innovation to get there. It just takes the will.
Question at the back there.
My name's Jodie Ginsberg. I'm a consultant for an education NGO called CAMFED. There's been a lot of talk today about the bottom of the pyramid. And obviously, the people who are going to be using this technology that you're talking about now are those children who are in the remotest areas, the hardest to reach areas that Justin Forsyth talked about earlier. I'm keen to hear from the panel about how technology, mobile technology, can really reach out to those people through education, because with the best will in the world, they can have the phones and they can have the most basic phones, but they're not going to be able to use any kind of Wikipedia, frankly, unless they have an education to go with that. So I'm keen to hear from you how you see that developing in the future, given that obviously education is the fastest driver of GDP improvement that there is.
Jim.
I mean, I think that, you know, I completely agree with you. You know, if someone is illiterate, then Wikipedia doesn't do them any good whatsoever. But what Wikipedia does, and not just Wikipedia, the vast resources of the internet, including all kinds of educational materials from all kinds of sources, it makes that world of information available as an adjunct and to lower the cost. It's very difficult to get a good quality education if the only thing you've got is 100 books in a rather pathetic library. And it's another thing to say you can get an education when, as well, you can get on your Wi-Fi tablet at school and access anything in the world that you want to know about. Any kind of educational materials, educational videos, all kinds of interesting things. So I don't view any of this technology as a replacement for any more than I would here in London. I'm not saying in London, where every kid's got a mobile phone, we can shut down the schools now. It's not a replacement for traditional education, but it's an adjunct and something that we all get a little annoyed by our phones, like when we forget to turn them off.
It works.
Yeah, down here in this dungeon it works. Impressive. But so I just think it's one piece of the overall puzzle that hopefully lowers the cost of the materials more than anything else.
Oh.
I agree. You know, one of the panelists earlier today said, you know, technology isn't going to be the solution for everything. It is part of the solution.
Any other questions from you? Yes, just one here.
Hi, it's Eliza again from The Guardian. I've just been fascinated all day to hear about information sharing and knowledge sharing because the site I've just launched for The Guardian, the Global Development Professionals Network, and breathe, is about sharing, it's a space for development professionals and people who work, businesses who work with development agents to talk about how to do development better. So I'm slightly disappointed that there are not more of these voices that we're talking about. I think the lady from WITS this morning mentioned that, you know, innovation is coming from the grassroots up. Everyone here is talking about it, but you're all spokespeople for, you know, the people who are doing the innovating. My question is then, what do you think that because the private sector have the will, they have the capacity, they have the infrastructure, and CSR is out the door, so it's now core to the business. Do you think the private sector has made NGOs redundant?
Well, I certainly don't, as we are an NGO. But and my remarks earlier, which were quite excited and enthusiastic about the private sector, were not meant to put down NGO efforts. I think that, you know, anytime we're trying to transform the world, to transform society. There are many different ways of going about it, and many different pieces of the puzzle. Some things are much better done in a nonprofit charitable way, and other things are much better done with serious attention to a bottom line and actually making it profitable and sustainable. So I do think that some NGO efforts will become obsoleted, but not the concept of what they're doing, but the way they go about it. So if you're an NGO dedicated to I don't know, bringing used computers into a very poor country, well, maybe that becomes less and less relevant as technology gets cheaper and cheaper. I'm not sure, whereas the general concept of helping to get people better access to technology is always going to be relevant.
I don't think NGOs are being made irrelevant. I agree with Jimmy that some of them will be. But I think a lot of what we heard today is that there's going to be a lot more partnerships. And a lot of stuff, and pretty much everything we're working on is about partnerships. But some of those NGOs are going to be time expired. And sorry, the other point I'd make is that the innovation does start at the grassroots because that's where the need is. And I can see a number of people around this room who I know personally who are very much part of that innovation stuff. This was innovation 11 years ago. No one would have thought about that. Similarly, M-KOPA, I see the Mwambita Makamba from Tanzania doing the stuff around women's empowerment. So, these are the people who are actually doing the stuff. Michael Joseph. They're the people who are doing the stuff. They're not just spokespeople.
Do you think that M-education will have matured at the point at which school curriculum start banning Wikipedia on mobiles as they have here? Listen, are there any other questions from the audience today? Yes.
I wanted to actually share a comment.
Good.
To this great example of bringing Wikipedia to people who don't have the fancy type of phone that we have. Intuit, many of you might know about Intuit, which is a big tax software company, has in India started a small sub-business called TextWeb. Not sure if you're familiar with it. So what they do is essentially, it's an open platform. So this also goes to the idea of creating platforms with different kinds of partners. Basically what it does is any app developer can develop apps which then allow someone who has just the cheap phone with just text messages to write a text message and then get information from Wikipedia. So I actually signed on to this from London.
Does it work?
If you type in @wiki-malaria, you get the entire or a big chunk of the wiki description of malaria. So it's a really interesting example. And Rajesh and I happened to talk to Scott Cook, who is the CEO of Intuit. And we asked him, what does this have to do with tax software? And what he said is that, as a corporation, what they look at and in trying to decide what kinds of services or products to offer is when they look back at their history of all of the different products and services that they've offered, they found that probably 80% of them had failed. This is not surprising. In general, in innovation, a lot of things fail. But when they looked at the things that didn't fail, they found that there were really 3 questions that those products actually ticked. So one of those questions was, is there a real big problem that this product or service would solve? The second question is, can we actually solve that problem? And then the third question is, can we do that in a way that is, a long-term sustainable way? And so, to Rajesh's point earlier on about broadening our core, it's sort of very much to the point that, you broaden the core and then you can see all of these very diverse applications.
Brilliant.
Yeah, Scott called me about this project, and I think it's one of these things. He's personally incredibly, if you've spoken to him, he's quite enthusiastic about it. And it's impossible to get off a phone call with him without thinking, wow, he's a lot smarter than I am, and what a great guy. So, yeah.
Good. We are about 5 or 6 minutes away from the close of this summit, which we started today by describing the research that London Business School had done on M-World. Our two colleagues here at the front row had worked on that, and they described to us what they'd found in the 5 recommendations that they had, upon which we've had such a brilliant discussion today. So Rajesh, I think it's at this point time for you to just sort of close us out. Come and join the guys on the stage and just give us your final thoughts, if you will.
Thank you very much, Becky. So it's been quite an amazing day. We started with that incredible sweep through the past, present, and future with Professor Ian Golden, and also that somewhat unsettling image, in my mind at least, of a calf being born with an iPad, or with an iPhone. We went on to these remarkable stories about the impact of mobiles in agriculture, in healthcare, the power of women and how it is empowering women. We heard the word partnerships again and again and again. We saw a bit about the role of China, whether on the supply side through Huawei or on the demand side through all of the things that are happening there. And importantly, we saw worlds coming together, very different industries, very different geographies, very different technologies coming together, and very different entities, governments, NGOs, and profit-making enterprises. And I was struck by the parallels to another transformative innovation. In fact, in the late 90s, Time magazine did a survey and anointed the most impactful innovation of the last millennium, the last 1,000 years. And that innovation was the printing press, Gutenberg's printing press. And I was struck by the parallels between what was happening at that time in the 1400s in mines in Germany on the Rhine Valley and what we have been discussing. So Gutenberg himself came not from the publishing industry or the church necessarily. He came from a family of people who did minting of coins. He grew up in an area where wine was cultivated and wine was produced thanks to the grape press that the Romans had introduced to Germany at the time. So he brings together these completely different worlds of winemaking and minting and typesetting to create this innovation, the printing press. Now, he tried it out. He was an entrepreneur. He actually was losing money on various ventures he'd engaged in, so he needed to make money. So he was looking for an application, a way of making money, not necessarily social impact. He tried education. The first ever app for the printing press was actually Grammar. That turned out to be not such a great profit-making enterprise. Then he realized, well, maybe it's the government or the establishment that might help us out. And so he approached the church, and hence we have the Gutenberg Bibles. Now, the church wanted a particular type of book that was rather elaborate, quite expensive. If you've been to the British Library and seen the Gutenberg Bible, these are works of art. These are not mass products. These are not bottom of the pyramid kinds of innovations. Gutenberg himself did not make a whole lot of money from that initial venture, in part because the prices were too high. But no one can deny the transformative impact that books and the printing press has had. And that has happened because of dramatic reductions in price. And the impact has been in creating science, the Renaissance really, many attribute to the printing press, the role of education among women. Indeed, the change from Latin, a Latin-based educational system, to the so-called vernacular, where innovation was happening not in Germany on the Rhine Valley or in Rome, where the church was located, but in the various locations within Europe that had embraced the printing press. And indeed, it was all vernacular-based, localized innovation that really took off. Now, that period, the Renaissance that we began with today, led to transformative growth in Europe. But that was nothing compared to the next era of transformative growth, which was during the Industrial Revolution. So if you look at GDP growth rates, pre versus post-industrial revolution, during the Industrial Revolution, GDP growth rates went up by a factor of a little over 4. Right? Now, the United Kingdom benefited from that, for example. It created an entire empire as a result of another set of innovations that were associated with the Industrial Revolution. What would you guess was the average annual growth rate during the period that the United Kingdom went through this transformative growth? By way of comparison, of course, we now see the transformative growth that is happening in emerging markets today, and we're used to 5, 10, 15% growth. The United Kingdom went from a very small, poor agrarian society to becoming a world empire as a result of that last wave of technology. What do you think was the average annual GDP growth rate? 8%, 20%. Well, it was 1.3%. So the wealth we see, a lot of the wealth we see from the Victorian era in this country was based on the power of compounding year after year of 1.3% growth. So the world we live in today, where, hopefully we'll eke out 1.3% growth in Europe one of these days as well, but around the emerging markets, we're in some cases orders of magnitude higher. This world is unprecedented in the history of humankind. And yet, as earlier panelists pointed out, we may still well be at the infancy of this period of transformation. So depending on who you believe, it's either 0.5 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 is where we stand in fulfilling potential. And in order for us to fulfill potential beyond the amazing things we've already seen, now, for example, just to appreciate it, who would have guessed that slum dwellers in Nairobi would have better access to mobile money, for example, than garage dwellers in Silicon Valley? For that transformation to happen, we need a lot more M-Pesa. So people keep asking, where are the next M-Pesas? And for M-Pesa, the next generation of M-Pesas to happen, for us to go from 0.5 or 2 to 10, we would need some of the things we've talked about, leadership, and in particular, leadership that is comfortable with crossing boundaries. Once again, much like Gutenberg, the ability to cross artificial, self-imposed industry boundaries, much like what we've seen in many industries, the ability to cross technological boundaries, and especially the ability to cross geographic boundaries. And so as we look toward that future that involves leadership, we also were pointed out, it was highlighted the role of not just the ability to cross boundaries, but passion and a desire to transform lives. The good news seems to be that you are all here from your busy days, taking time out of your busy days, because you seem to have that ability and that desire. Before I end now, I want to say a few things, a few notes of thanks. One, to Nick Land, to Andrew Dunnett of the Vodafone Foundation for initiating this whole day, which is, I'm sure, will lead to a huge number of partnerships, or certainly some impact. I also would like to thank my colleague, Mike. Actually, it's an example of the power of women. My colleague Kamalini, who very quietly has a powerful impact. Becky Anderson, I don't know how you managed to stay all day standing up in heels, no less. And you can see the power of women right there. And someone who really hasn't made herself very well known today, but who was in many ways the mastermind of this whole day, and that's Lisa Felton. I don't see Lisa back there. Lisa has been instrumental without really taking any of the limelight, but I think she deserves very much the credit for making a success out of this. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your energy, and let's go out and change the world.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you. Your summit is closed. Thank you, guys.